Okay, so I'm Carly Strasser. I'm from the California Digital Library, which is just across the bay in Oakland, downtown Oakland. And today I'm just going to be talking about a few of the tools that we have that we're working on at the CDL. Just so that you're clear on what the CDL is, it took me a few web clicks before I realized what the CDL was when I got hired there. The CDL is actually part of the University of California system. So we're part of the UC Office of the President, which means that we hang out with President Udoff and all the payroll people and all the student affairs people that handle the full 10 campuses. So UCLA, UC Berkeley, UCSD, all of them. And then within the CDL, I'm part of the UC Curation Center. And so we're a group that's basically trying to develop services and tools that are going to help researchers and other folks at the UC and beyond with their digital content. So, and I'm specifically interested in data. So I'm a researcher by training, and I'm mostly there to help the UC3 and the CDL in general think about the researchers when they think about dealing with data sets. So I'm actually just going to talk about these three tools today: EasyID, DataOps, and the DMP tool. So I'm sure that you're all catching on that data management is kind of a big deal these days, and most of the reason is because that for very many years it was all just written down, and it was very easy to capture workflows and data and your thought processes because it was in a lab notebook, and everything was written down in that way so that if somebody ever wanted to figure out what you were thinking, they could just go back and read that notebook, and that's how we know about all these famous researchers and their work. These days, though, data is collected in a lot of different ways. It's born digital for the most part. A lot of people take laptops and iPads out into the field. We're getting live streams of data from satellites and from oceanographic equipment. And as all these data are coming in, researchers are developing very complex workflows. And so they're using all kinds of different software to manage their data, to archive it, to organize it, to publish it. And as they're thinking about these complex workflows, they're not doing a very good job of keeping track of all of these little bits and pieces of what they've been doing with their data. And if you've ever seen a researcher's workflow, you know that like this is not that uncommon. And maybe a digital workflow would be really useful for helping to clear up some of this paperwork, because at least you could kind of follow the train of thought that the researcher had when they were actually creating the results that they publish in their journal articles. So what I like to say is that the truth is not easy to listen to or hear, especially if you're a librarian or a data manager. But the truth about researchers is that they don't really do a lot of data management. They don't think about it. They don't. Sometimes they don't know what the word metadata means. They understand the concept, but they don't actually know much about metadata. They're not aware of data repositories that they could put their data sets into. They don't know why they should share their data, and they certainly aren't doing much sharing publicly. So I'm sure you guys are all aware there's all these OSTP and these kind of federal mandates that are coming out, and the NSF and other funders are starting to require this. So the researchers aren't going to be able to, it's not going to be an option much longer for them to kind of plug their ears and pretend that they don't have to worry about it. So the first tool I'm going to talk about here is the DMP tool. And basically, if you're not aware of what a data management plan is, it's basically just a document that says what you're going to do with your data throughout, not both, but throughout the research project. So from the beginning all the way to the end, what are you going to be doing with it? And a specific type of data management plan is the ones that people are producing for funders. And so for funders, a data management plan tends to be a short plan that's just submitted alongside the grant application. And it has some sort of an outline about what types of data will be collected, the methods, the standards, the metadata, and some other details, as well as the how and the why of how you're going to be doing this data management. And of course, researchers responded to these calls for data management plans from funders with a lot of scratching of heads and panicked conversations with librarians on Friday at 4 p.m. when the grant deadline is looming, trying to figure out what they're supposed to be writing in these data management plans. So the DMP tool project was kind of born out of that chaotic period of the beginning of data management plan mandates. And the groups that you see down here at the bottom are the groups that contributed. So we were kind of the founding organizations that started working with the idea of creating a DMP tool. And we started working in January of 2011 and basically kind of developed requirements and divided up the work among these various groups, and it was all self-funded and in-kind. So it was a great model of collaboration and working together to come up with a solution that would help all of our institutions across the board. And the resulting tool is located at, let's see here. Okay, so this is the front page of the DMP tool, and the first thing you do is click Get Started to start out using this tool. And what you'll see here is that you get a login window, and you get to use your shibboleth identification from your institution to log in for many cases. So I'm from the UC Office of the President, so I can log in there. And if you don't have any of those choices, if your institution isn't listed, isn't set up, you can go to none of the above and start your own account. So I am a returning user, so I'm going to go ahead and log into the tool, and this is free to use for anybody. Okay, so now I'm in the tool, and you can see that I have my login credentials up at the top there. And what I can do is go in and select the type of plan I want to create. And the way that the choices I have can be located on this Funder Requirements tab here. And so what you can see is that we have quite a few organizations represented that we can help you create data management plans for. Some of their nonprofits, like the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. There's some specific initiatives that are inside of various institutions, and then there's lots of NSF suggestions. And the thing about this funder requirements page is that you have active links that take you to that funder's actual verbiage that they use to describe data management plans. There's also some sample plans. We're working on getting more of those. Clearly we're a little short on example plans. That's this middle column here. And the funder templates are also available as RTFs. So you can just download the template. You don't have to log in at all. If you're not into using a wizard to create plans, you can just move forward like that. So let's see. So if I go back to my plans, I can start a plan for, say, the generic NSF. You can see I've already done an example here at some point. So I'm going to start my plan, and the first thing it does is it makes me give it a name. So I worked on copepods back in the day, so I'm going to write down copepod stuff, which is a terrible name. That's very bad practice to write such a general name there. And then once you actually enter the tool, you can see that at the top up here it has the information that the funder suggested that you do. There's a help box here that has more extensive information that we would like you to take a look at. And then you can see that I have additional help for the UC Office of the President because that's what I'm logged in as. And so you can configure as an institution special help for your institution. And then if you look on the right, there's resources. And so I have specific resources for the UC Office of the President. And then I also have general resources down here that are available for anybody who's logged into the tool. So once I am happy with my tool, or going to go out and come back later and work on it some other time, then if I go back to the My Plans page, you can see I now have my copepod stuff here. I can come back in later, edit it, view it, I can delete it. If I want to share it, then it'll generate a PDF of this document for me, and now I can share it with a collaborator. And then I can also export it as rich text or plain text and format it so that it matches the rest of my funder, proposal. Let's see. So we've had lots of uptake. That's the short version of this graph. Lots of people like this tool, think it's a great idea, it's super easy. Researchers are kind of fretting at the last minute, and a librarian or a grants office can just say, go to this tool, it'll help. And so we've had 736 institutions represented either via logging in from Shibboleth or logging in as none of the above and specifying their institution. Lots of plans, lots of users. I will say there's a asterisk next to these stats because we haven't had a very good idea of figuring out how to pluck out the ones that finish plans. So if I were doing a workshop, for instance, and 20 people in the room started a plan so they could kind of play with it, that's in these statistics, which isn't a good a good kind of view of how people are using the tool. So with that in mind, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation thought that this was a good enough start, that they gave us a lot of money to do some new functionality development in 2013. And there's all kinds of things we're going to be working on, and I can talk more if you guys want, but not right now. And the one that I want to point out is the Open API in the bottom right. So we're really interested in making sure that this tool can link in with existing tools, with other things that other people are developing to help support data publication, data sharing, data access, and making sure that that's very easy and very straightforward for other tools to do is what we're kind of focusing on in the course of this grant. Okay, EasyID, which is a service that I rarely talk about, so I'm going to apologize if I don't make 100% sense, but I am willing to say that the colleague that normally talks about EasyID, Joan Starr, loves to talk about EasyID. So if you want to know more, then Joan Starr is going to be delighted to talk to you. So EasyID is a service that the tagline is long-term identifiers made easy, and essentially you can use EasyID to create a persistent identifier, to manage your identifiers and the associated metadata with those identifiers, and then to actually resolve the identifiers. So EasyID works with DOIs and ARCs, or archival resource keys. Those go through that resolver, and then you get to the website that has the object. So I'm sure none of this is necessarily news to the publishing community. And our DOIs come from DataSite. So CDL is a DataSite member, and the DOIs that we have are affiliated with the DataSite organization. So DataSite is if you're not familiar with it, it's a nonprofit international organization, and it's an International DOI Foundation member, which means they have the ability to give out DOIs. And the big goal for DataSite is to enable access to research, promote data as important outputs, and support data archiving. So they've got some great goals, and it's a great organization that we work with closely to create these DOIs for our researchers. So the identifiers that we have come from the International DOI Foundation. And so we get DOIs. Those DOIs go through DataSite. The DataSite DOIs then come to us at the CDL. We have this EasyID service, and we also generate ARCs, which are our own identifiers, and both of those go to the EasyID clients. And the EasyID clients are, there's a lot of them. The most famous is probably Figshare, but we also support Dryad, PureJ, which is a new journal, and then we have there's many clients that we work with, academic groups, and beyond. So that's kind of the gist of EasyID in general. And then if you're thinking about what are these ARCs, there's a difference between a DOI and an ARC, in that DOIs are very much strictly kind of monitored by those international DOI organizations, whereas archival resource keys, or ARCs, which come from the CDL, are a little bit more flexible. The DOIs come from the scholarly communication community, so this is something that people are familiar with primarily from scholarly publications, whereas ARCs are more from the museums and archives community, so that's what we've been supporting a lot at the CDL. The DOIs have this kind of established brand name. People that know identifiers are very familiar with DOIs typically. However, ARCs are a little more option-rich and open source. And then generally DOIs cost money, a lot more money than ARCs do. So these are all kind of things that we pitch to people, because depending on what you need, you might want one or the other or both. So we offer both. And this is the interface for EasyID and the URL. So you can see that Joan has set up a very nice description of what EasyID is. You can go in and read about these different identifiers, the pricing. So organizations sign up, become EasyID members, and then I think you can mint something like 1 million DOIs for one low rate. So can't tell you what the rate is, but I'm sure it's under the pricing guidelines there. And of course, all of this has to do with data citation. So that's what we're really talking about here. And I always tell researchers, a data citation looks just like a paper citation. I'd love to see data in the references, in the kind of works cited at the end of these journal articles that they're already writing. It's something that's very familiar to them. And generally, this data citation idea allows readers to find the data products, get the credit, promote reproducibility, and then it in general is a better measure of research impact. I spend a lot more time collecting data than writing papers, and so I'd love to get credit for all those data sets that I generated. Okay, I'm kind of talking fast. Any questions yet about EasyID or DMP Tool?
I'm not sure I understand why EasyID exists. I mean, you were just taking the case of the DOI.
Right.
It looks like it almost looks like you're creating multiple DOIs for the same item, and that seems like a bad practice.
We are definitely not creating multiple DOIs for the same item. So for instance, let's take an example from Figshare. They work closely with PLOS. If PLOS has a graph and they want to assign a DOI to that particular graph in an article, then that graph gets imported into Figshare. It's now part of Figshare's kind of framework, and Figshare gets a DOI from us. So Figshare is one of our clients. They get that DOI. That DOI is now minted by Figshare.
EasyID is a DOI register?
Yes, exactly. So there's not very many places you can get DOIs. Crossref obviously is the one that most publishers know about. DataSite is kind of really focused on giving DOIs for data and kind of whatever that data looks like. And so we're one of the minimal numbers of organizations in the U.S. that can mint DOIs. And so we register people. We're responsible for making sure that we're not kind of willy-nilly throwing DOIs out there. We get into trouble if a DOI gets associated with a broken link. So we're kind of on the hook for all those DOIs that people generate by being our clients.
One other thing that at least I think I understand about this, but you can correct me if
Sure.
I'm wrong, that there's also a scaling issue because publishers tend to think of, I've got an article with a DOI, but in some of these data sets, you can have thousands and thousands of things that you want to attach identifiers to.
Absolutely.
So that's why the DOI, the difference between the DOI and the ARC
Right.
is actually quite meaningful. You do have a DOI, but then you've got ARCs for all these little bits and pieces.
Right, and that's definitely like the different use cases for ARCs and DOIs. A lot of times ARCs become more useful if you have, for instance, we're working with the Maria Biocode project because they have tons and tons of samples from one island, and they want an identifier for each one of those samples. Now, the DOIs for that would be $1 bazillion. It's totally not going to happen, but the ARCs are more affordable. So that's the other service of EasyID, but it's related to ARCs.
I'll talk to you about it.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes? Who ups the, yeah.
Repeat the question. 'Cause
Yes, okay, so the question is, what happens to those broken links that we're on the hook for? There's a lot of frantic conversations between DataSite and Jonestar and whoever it belongs to. And they try and rectify it as quickly as possible. In general, the EasyID client is responsible for logging into this system and keeping track of that. We had an interesting situation with Figshare, which is our fun use case, for really making this a big project with lots of DOIs, and Figshare minted a bunch of DOIs in error, and so we had all these DOIs that were returning 404s or whatever, and there was kind of a panic from the top down, and so I think it took them a day or two to fix it, but basically we're all on the hook. So between us and Figshare and DataSite, we don't, it's not okay to have broken links to DOIs, and so I'm sure that Joan has some system for checking those types of things, and I'm not sure how they caught that particular example, but it's definitely on the radar to make sure that those links don't get broken. Okay, so DataOps is the last tool I'll talk about here, and this is a project that I came into the CDL to start working on, and the tagline is describe, manage, and share your data. We did just find out we got an NDSA Innovation Award for DataOps yesterday, so that's good news, so stay in your seats because it's going to be amazing. The idea of this project, which was funded by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and Microsoft Research, was to intercept researchers where they already work. And whether we like it or not, a lot of times that's in Microsoft Excel. If you said that to a data manager or a repository, a person who's running a repository, they do wince. They don't really like the idea that people are doing a lot of their data management in Excel, but that's where they are. So the idea was to really facilitate archiving, sharing, and publishing of data sets by really zeroing in on the data management and organization bit. So the things that they're doing already in Microsoft Excel, and then ideally that would enable data reuse and reproducibility in the longer term. So the tool, after a lot of talking to researchers, we decided the tool should do 4 basic things. It should help perform a best practices check, so see what's wrong with the data set, generate metadata in ecological markup language, or EML, get an identifier and a citation for that actual data set via EasyID, and then post the data to a repository. So the repository that we're currently linking to is the OneShare repository, which is basically a kind of a collaboration between the Merit repository, which is the UC kind of institutional repository run by the CDL, and DataOne, which is a large NSF cyber infrastructure project that's federating existing repositories and getting them to kind of talk to one another and share metadata. So the OneShare repository was supposed to be like Figshare or SlideShare, one of these other kind of share sites. It's supposed to be for anybody anywhere. All you need is an email address, and you can deposit your data in OneShare, with the caveat that it's CC0 licensed. So it's in the public domain. You don't get a say in what people are doing with your data, but you get to do it for free. And so that's the only repository that it's linked up to right now, but we have a longer term vision of getting lots of repositories linked up to it. So just to show you what this web app looks like, this is the web app version of the tool. There's also an add-in for Excel that you can download and install locally. I'm a Mac person, and you can't do that with a Mac, so I always demo the web app because it's available for any platform. So the first thing you have to do is sign in to get started, and the only two choices right now are Windows Live ID and Facebook. We're very interested in expanding those options in the very near future. Okay, so now that I've signed in, this is the home page here, and I can you can see I can drag and drop or browse to select the file that I want to start working on. It takes CSV or XLSX. So I'm going to pick this guy. So let's pretend that I just uploaded this one. And it'll first ask me, how do you want to end up depositing this into your repository, as a CSV or an XLSX? So we tell you you should do CSV, but occasionally XLSX it can't be avoided for some reason, so we wanted to give them that option. So the first thing it does is it walks you through what might be wrong with your spreadsheet. So this is that best practices check. And you can see that it first lists the potential problem here on the left, why it might be a problem, how you can fix it, and then the locations in the spreadsheet. So this is intended to be kind of a teaching moment and telling researchers, hey, maybe you don't want to embed comments. Maybe you want to take that comment, put it in a new column, and kind of just help guide them towards the idea that they should be making data tables that are kind of independent on their own spreadsheets and are easily understandable without a lot of help from the researcher. So you don't actually have to change anything. You can just ignore all of those if you want to. And then you can move on to the metadata. So this is the set of metadata that's from ecological markup language, or EML, which is fairly flexible, and it's pretty general metadata. It's name, address, some temporal information, some spatial information. We do have 7 required fields, 3 of which are the top 3 you see here, and those are intended to basically just capture the minimal kind of DataSite metadata that we need to generate a citation. And any data repository manager will tell you that's a complete waste, because if that's all you get, you can't use the data set. And we totally agree, but again, we're trying to kind of ease the researcher into this process. And so to actually fill out all the required fields, they do have to scroll and say, oh, I should probably enter in some of these other things since I'm doing this anyway. And then it's got little help on the side here so that you can get information about what you're trying to fill out. Let's see here. So the next step is to generate a citation. So there's some information at the top that kind of tells you, this is what an identifier is. This is why you shouldn't just generate identifiers willy-nilly. You should kind of make sure that you're thinking about versions and that kind of thing. So the first thing that you do, if I hadn't already done this, I would click on Retrieve an Identifier, and it asks me what repository I want to connect to. So you're getting your identifier from the repository. So if they have a specific set of identifiers that they're interested in using, they can configure those with their API. So the only one here is OneShare, but you can also do the practice repository, which is kind of the sandbox, which we quickly realized we needed after we got a lot of funky data sets in OneShare. But so once I've clicked that, then I get this identifier. You can see it's an ARC. We're not giving out DOIs because there's not a lot of management of the data that's coming in here. So the title is there. If I wanted to put in the version number, it's there. It's got my name, and the identifier is there in the citation that I can generate if I hadn't already done that. And then the final step is to actually post it to a repository. So again, you get this same drop-down menu, again, only one right now. We'd love to see, hundreds of repositories listed here. You accept the terms, and then you post, and it thinks for a second, and hopefully it says success. And you get this message, and then you also get an email that has your citation built into it. And I will say there's just a couple of differences between the add-in and the web app, and the reason that we developed both was because, again, this platform compatibility issue. Also, a lot of people that we spoke to didn't have administrative rights to download software onto their hard drives and their computers. I am one of those people. I got a CDL laptop and I couldn't download add-ins. So it's a very common problem if you're not an independent researcher kind of working on your own somewhere. So the web app was really intended to kind of answer all of the needs that we had from those other groups. And so this tool is open source and freely available to anybody who wants to code to it. Unfortunately, the open source code or the open source community tends to like Python and some of those kinds of languages, and this is in C#.net, so we haven't had a lot of uptake from the open source community. And so in terms of where we're going, the DataOps longer term goals are to get it into a new language, potentially Python. We're really going to focus our efforts on the web app because we can reach the most people if we develop out the web app. We're going to emphasize the best practices check because that's what is unique about DataOps. So there's other tools you can use to generate metadata and to post to a repository, but this is really where it shines. We don't want to throw out all those other features though, but we want to leverage some existing tools, the ones that are maybe doing it better than we are, and incorporate them into the tool. And then enable customization. So for instance, if you're at Oak Ridge National Lab and you want your researchers to use DataOps to put data into your local repository, you don't want it to be publicly available, and you want them to have a specific identifier associated with that based on whatever you told them they needed to use, we want to make it really easy for Oak Ridge to be able to configure that. So that's kind of the longer term goal. We did just get notification that we have a supplemental grant to improve DataOps a little bit. That came from the NSF Data One project. So alongside that project, they're giving us some money to develop this out a little bit further. And this is the information for learning more about DataOps. There's the website and the Twitter and the Facebook, and then the code site actually has the code as well as a running list of issues that people have encountered. It also has a running list of improvements. So there's lots of good ideas out there about how we could take DataOps and make something really cool and link it up with things, and wouldn't it be great if it did this? And so we've kind of got this Bitbucket site up, and on that wiki you can go in and just suggest until you run out of things to suggest. So I think there's about 85 things on the list right now. So all right, so that's it. You can go to the CDL Services UC3 URL and get information on all three of these, and then my information is here, and I'm happy to talk about this more if anybody has questions about this. Okay.
Thank you very much, Carly. As you can see, they are making it really easy for you, or actually they're making it easy for your authors
Yes.
to do this and get it right. So it's really important for the publishers. You may not be the one that actually uses this, but you can point your authors to this. So that leads to, I'm going to ask the first question,
Sure.
which is, you're from the University of California system. Who is this available to?
Everybody, anybody.
right.
So the DMP tool is completely open and free for anyone to use. DataOps is completely open and free for anybody to use. EasyID, you have to have an account because we have to charge you somehow.
Yeah.
But it's open to anybody who wants to make an account. Yes.
Not to go back to the same.
We can go back to the same.
but
That's okay.
Just, I guess what I'm getting hung up on is maybe where DataSite fits in the chain, and the sort of difference between function and DataSite and a function
Of EasyID.
Yeah.
Right. So DataSite is, they don't give people DOIs.
Okay.
They give people accounts to give people DOIs, if that makes sense. So you can't go to DataSite and say, I need a DOI for this data set that I have. Can you give it to me? They'll say, you need to contact one of the registrars that's available, and EasyID is one of those. Other questions?
Question for Carly?
Yeah, it's like totally cocktail hour, but
That's the
I'll be
problem.
here.
Yeah,
I know, right? Yes.
David,
Just for reference, how big is the software development team that's putting all this stuff together?
and repeat the question, please.
Right.
Working.
So the question was, how big is the software development team and how long have we been working on it? That varies from project to project. EasyID, I think, has 2 people working on it. The DataOps project, all of the development happened via Microsoft Research. So they contracted out some folks from India who did all of the coding, which is why we can't do much with it, because nobody in our shop knows C#.net. So that was a team of I don't know how many, and it was about an 8-month development sprint, literally sprint. And then the DMP tool, with the Sloan money, we were able to hire 2 full-time, 100% dedicated to the DMP tool developers. So they'll be working on it for the next 12 months or so, and we're hoping to make lots of progress because we do have those dedicated developers. Before we had maybe 5 people that had it in their giant list of things to work on when they have a chance. So I think in general the UC3 has, I don't know, maybe 5-ish developers that are kind of full-time devoted, except now we just hired 3 more, so we'll say 8-ish. So, and we're always looking for people to collaborate with to develop things more. So, and Data One also has developers that they work with, and we've been able to get them to help out in some cases too. So, because we also have the merit repository and the other tools, and so there's lots of things to keep these guys busy. I wish I could code in something other than MATLAB.
One other thing I want to point out, just to give you some perspective, is that, the 2 things I often encounter, people think, oh, but it's just for Californians. That's why I asked that question up front, to
Yep.
make sure people don't know this is for anybody. The other thing is, you don't have to be big.
Right.
Yeah, I've worked with some publishers who then work with authors that actually have some very small projects, but this is still a very, very useful thing. So this is not just for the big guys. This is for everybody.
Yeah, and Joan, like I said, she's like the best service manager ever, and so attentive, and just loves to work out unique solutions for groups to use EasyID. And so, I encourage you, if you're interested, to contact me, and I'll give you her information or whatever. So, yes.
Has the usage of these tools tended to be for particular disciplines?
Particular discipline. So have the tools been used by particular disciplines? EasyIDs across the board. DMP tool, I think the most downloaded funder templates and used templates are for the NIH. So we have a lot of people that are working on biomedical research who use this tool. That said, it's kind of across the board, lots of NSF, lots of NIH, and then a little bit of the rest of the funders for DMP tool. And then in terms of the DataOps project, when we started that project, Gordon and Betty Moore really wanted us to focus on the earth, environmental science, and atmospheric biological communities. They're underrepresented in terms of sharing their data. Other groups are doing a little better, and so they wanted us to kind of zero in on that group, which is why we partnered with Data One. They're also focusing on those same kind of groups of people. So we do have that ecological markup language built in. That's hardwired in. We really wanted to have plug-and-play metadata so that a social scientist could pick the one that they wanted to use to generate metadata, but that wasn't possible in the short time span. That said, the EML is pretty generic, and it can be used by just about anybody. In terms of uptake, it's unclear. It's not very easy for us to know where people are coming from that are using that tool. We only really know who's depositing data, and that's kind of a mixed bag. It's a little bit of everybody.
Any more questions?
Yes? Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Toby, you should come up.
Okay. The question is what tools are we using to store our data and so on. In fact, our data warehouse we built ourselves, but we're now sharing it with other international organizations, and some national statistical offices are using it as well. So we are, the tool is being shared around. But it's not open source in and of itself. Some of the visualization tools, we're using Tableau quite a lot. Tableau is it's a freemium thing, so you can use Tableau to a certain degree for free, and then you pay to use a bit more. So we're using that for some of the visualizations. The active charts, we developed that in-house. We will make that code open source. It's not yet, but we need to do some tweaking on it, but we will be making that open source. The bed life index was a bespoke thing. I wouldn't recommend anyone else actually uses it because it's so expensive because you need a team behind it to make it work. But we're trying to use tools that are out there rather than to reinvent our own tools. Yeah, the question is do we have a review process for ingesting data from countries and so on? And the answer is absolutely. That's one of the things that the OECD does. So we have statisticians. We have a whole army of them, and their job is to work with countries and other suppliers of data to ingest the data. We then quality assure it. We crunch it together so it becomes comparable. And we go back to the data providers if we find irregularities in their data. That's because we do from time to time, to make sure that the numbers are still comparable and to affect sort of quality assurance. So that's a major part of what the OECD is there for, is in fact to keep national statistical offices sort of honest. I didn't say that.
Any other questions? We are at 5:32, so thank you very much.